Hi there. Hi. There's some of my ex-students in the background, and that's why they are whooping. I had to pay them a lot of money to come here. Or free lunch, as it is for a student. First of all, I wanted to say thank you for inviting me to talk today. There's no greater privilege for a teacher than an audience that's actually volunteered to be here. So I want to talk to you today about conflict and encouraging conflict in the classroom. Now, when I say conflict, I'm not talking about if you came into my classroom, me walking over to Johnny and saying, "Hey Johnny, Mark thinks your mum's really fat." That's the kind of conflict I want to avoid. There's lots of bad jokes in this presentation, by the way, so please laugh heartily to help me feel that I've actually done a good job. So I'm talking about the conflict that happens when you face a new idea or you come across a topic that you don't understand. Psychologists call this being in a state of cognitive dissonance. And when you're in such a state, what you're more likely to do is actually rely on your older beliefs. You're more likely to reinforce your beliefs and turn to your old knowledge and your old beliefs, regardless of what the new evidence is presenting itself as. Now, students do this in one of two ways. The first thing is they rely on their own internal beliefs. This could be anything from, it's because I'm tired, I was on Snapchat all night, to more sad beliefs like I'm not clever enough, I'm not capable, my friends are better than me. The other way they reinforce their beliefs is externally. And they do this by relying on the teacher. So imagine you're in the classroom and you don't understand something. The first thing you're going to do is put your hand up and ask the teacher. So the teacher comes over. If he's feeling particularly lazy, he'll just tell you the answer. If he's a slightly better teacher, like me, he'll probably get involved in some kind of Socratic dialogue where through a series of questions, he'll get you to come up with the answer. Underlying this process is what's actually happening is that the student's getting a mental hug. He's getting the reassurance from the teacher that actually, okay, I don't understand the subject, but it's okay, Sir thinks I'm capable of understanding that subject. As my experience with teaching has got bigger and bigger and more, I've realized that actually by doing this, by getting involved in this kind of interaction, we may actually be shortchanging our students a little bit. But I'll come back to that slightly later. Now, when I first got started in teaching, my lessons tended to oscillate between two moments. The first moment I call the aha moment. So that's, I'm at the front of the board, I'm explained everything, I turn around, aha, everyone's understood it, they're looking at me smiling and they're like, "Mr. Yogarajah, you're fantastic, we love you, now get lost so we can just get on with the work. Go and have your 15th cup of tea," or whatever it is. The second moment is what I call the uh-oh moment. This is when you are at the board, you do exactly the same thing, and you turn around, and there's deathly silence. Good. I'm so glad there was no deathly silence there. And you're looking there, and you're going, okay, what's going on? And a hand slowly goes up, shaking, because I'm a fearsome teacher, right? It's just like shaking. "Johnny, what's the matter?" "I don't get it, sir." "What do you mean you don't get it?" "I just don't get it." "Can you be more specific?" "What's the ocean got to do with maths, sir?" Specific, Pacific. Now that's what's known as a, thanks. That's what's known as a teacher joke. And that's the kind of joke where the teacher thinks he's really funny and everyone else doesn't. But I used to hate these moments, these uh-oh moments. By the way, I think the history of the world can be written as aha and uh-oh moments. Fire, aha, fire burning my hand, uh-oh. But I hated these moments because suddenly the thinking was put back on me. I had to try and come up with an explanation that the student would get. Well, I could do that, or there are one of two things I could do. The first thing is I could blame the student. I could say, "Oh, Johnny, he's so lazy. I know he's been on Snapchat all night." Or the famous one that all teachers love to say about every student, and I'm sure that you guys have had this said about you as well, which is, "You lack focus." As if you were some kind of lens, and just by squeezing your neck really tight and turning you slightly to the left, everything will become clear. Or I could do the second thing, which is turning it back on me, and this is what I do. I would go away and try and come up with a better way of thinking about the topic. And in fact, I soon realized it wasn't necessarily a better way, it was a different way of thinking about the topic. I'd effectively try and find a different analogy for looking at that topic. Now, there's a philosopher called Douglas Hofstadter who says that actually Analogy creation is what the fire of creativity is. And our ability to move up and down the ladder of analogies is what makes us good abstract thinkers. So famously, he cites Einstein. I think Einstein is cited for everything, but here, he cites Einstein as being very good at coming up with analogies. The fact that he was able to think of waves as particles revolutionized physics. So inspired by Einstein, sadly not his hair, I would go away and try and come up with a different analogy. And it took ages. I'm not going to lie to you. Sometimes it would take weeks. I mean, there's only so many different ways you can think about a quadratic equation, right? But that I found interesting as well. The fact that when you came to the end of an analogy or to the end of the process where you couldn't come up with another analogy was almost like coming to the edge of your thoughts. And that was very fascinating. Interestingly, it took Einstein 15 years to go from thinking about traveling on the back of a light wave to coming up with the theory of relativity. That's 15 years of frustration, 15 years of hard work, 15 years of facing these internal conflicts. When I read about this, I again realized we'd been making a big mistake in education. This is inspired by one of my favorite educators called Ken Robinson. We're going to try a little bit of interactivity here, audience. How many different uses are there for this? Hands up, please. Now you can shout out. How many different uses are there for this?
As many as you want.
Thank you, Cameron. Tell me one of them.
Cutting paper.
Cutting paper. Thank you. What else?
He says cutting hairs.
Cutting hair. Anything else?
Opening beer bottles.
Opening beer bottles. There's a university lecturer there for you now. I'm joking. Interestingly, I do this experiment with my year 7s all the way up to my year 13s and now my graduates over there. The year 7s, who are about 11 years old, first year in school, okay, in high school, they're fantastic. They'll say all sorts of things like binoculars or a spaceship or a bridge for ants or a toothpick for giants, okay? These are all their examples. Year 7s are incredibly good at putting themselves in different perspectives and looking at the world from different perspectives, okay? Year 13s say exactly what my student said. Cutting hair, stabbing. That's another thing that happens, by the way, is that the older you get, the more violent your examples tend to become. I don't know whether that's education or hormones, but anyway, we'll face that another time. So what's happened in our education system where you get an 11-year-old who's incredibly good at coming up with all these different sorts of analogies to a 16 and 18 and 20-year-old who've suddenly become very narrow with the way they're looking at things? Well, if you think about a school is an incredibly predictable place. You start at a certain time, you finish at a certain time, lessons occur at a certain time, you go to the toilet at a certain time. If you're a teacher, that means at the end of the day when you're holding yourself like that because of all your 15 cups of tea. They're incredibly predictable places. But one of the side effects of such predictability is that our learning has also become very predictable as well. When a student walks into a classroom, he expects to learn something. He's given an hour to learn something, and he will learn something. And the teacher knows that he must teach him something, so he has to teach him something. And if he doesn't, then the teacher's a failure, and the student, if he doesn't learn, then he's a failure. We've turned our schools into these kinds of narrow, rigid corridors of learning. But by doing this, we're churning out students and people who are also narrow and rigid and predictable and safe. And yet, we then chuck them out of school, and then they have to go and face the world, which is not narrow, which is not rigid, which isn't safe, which is totally unpredictable. What we need to be doing with our institutions is changing the narrow corridors and making them into dynamic coral reefs. We need to make them into some kind of organic, frustrating places where there's constant conflict going along. Adam Phillips is a psychoanalyst, and he says one of the most important things that childhood should teach you is for you to learn how to deal with frustration. We're not doing that in schools. We're not teaching our students to learn with frustration. We're giving them the easy way out. And to a certain extent, the kind of motivation behind that is a good thing, because really we want our students to feel safe. We don't want them to feel uncomfortable. But I think in the long run, that shortchanges them. Now for me, what started off this kind of process of analogy creation? Well, it was that conflict. It was that conflict between my knowledge, my everyday ordinary knowledge, and the lack of understanding that the student had. So one of the things I've started to do in my maths lessons is that every time I teach a topic, I get the students to go away and come up with an analogy. I get them to do the hard work. I get them to go away and come up with a different lens with which to view that topic. And then they come back and they debate it amongst each other. They work collaboratively and they find that their knowledge goes from being everyday ordinary to suddenly being redefined. And it becomes richer, more profound, and far more deep. Thank you.